2.5 years ago, I was what you might call the right hand for my boss, who owned the motel that I worked for, technically as head housekeeper. But I had recently begun training to run the full spectrum of the motel, including all things office and front desk, overseeing staff and minor maintenance, so that my boss could take a vacation. It was a 42-room mom and pop place set back off the road, so it was pretty peaceful for the most part. There were still a few motley ones every now and then, but that's at any motel in small-town USA. But as intimidating as the new responsibility sounded, with only 2 other staff members to worry about, it was a cakewalk. The day comes for the boss to take her leave, and I'm now in charge of her life's blood, sweat, and tears, and pumped for the opportunity to show what I was made of. She left Friday morning, and the rest of the day ran like clockwork, until around 8:30 that night. I also lived on the property in an apartment, which allowed me to run back and forth to the office for guest check-ins and any office duties I needed to tend to. So when the doorbell alerted, I looked at my phone and saw an older gentleman, early 60s maybe, staring through the door looking at an attendant. I spoke through the camera to let him know that I'd be there in 30 seconds, and started on my way to the office. As I would with any guest, while checking them in, I made small talk about his trip and gave the lowdown on where to get good food in town. I got him squared away in the computer and showed him how to get to his room. As he was getting his credit card situated back in his wallet, I thanked him for staying with us and called him Mr. Logan. He looked up at me and smiled and said I should call him Joe, and then he made his way out of the office. Less than 30 minutes had passed, and I get a call from room 135, Joe's room. He proceeds to tell me that he would like to use the desk lamp, but there is no light bulb in it, and could he please get one, which immediately threw up a red flag, because I had cleaned that room myself, and I made it a habit to check every light bulb in the room, and know for a fact that the light bulb was there, because I used the desk lamp as I was cleaning. I told him I would bring one down, and he immediately said he would rather come to the office to get it. The office was attached to an apartment-type space that my boss lived in during the week, and it was very dark in the back, and set up in a way that would have made it very difficult, if not impossible, to see through the door to the apartment. Considering I was the only employee on the property, having him come to the very secluded office in the dark wasn't going to happen. I felt more comfortable taking him to his room, where I knew there were other guests around that area that were sitting outside that could help me if needed. So when he says he would rather come to the office, I told him that I would have to bring it to him because my boss would kill me if I made a guest change a light bulb. He says he understands, and I breathe a little easier. He's not going to get me cornered in my secluded office to do God knows what. I grab the light bulb, and before I can get to the front door, I look, and there he is looking through the glass on the door, staring me down in the most unsettling way. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, and I finally started shaking. I opened the door and just said, "Let's get your lamp working," and started walking past him. He then said he thinks he forgot to sign his credit card receipt, and can we please go back and double check. I told him that he had already dropped the receipt, but that I would check it in the morning, and get it from him if I needed it. That was total crap. He made a big deal about finding his good pen to sign it with. We both know he signed it. With that rejected idea, we continued to his room. As I walked in, I kicked the doorstop wedge that I brought with me under the door so it couldn't close without assistance, and had he tried, I would have had time to yell for help from the guys next door to him. I think he figured that out and moved away from the door. As I put the bulb in the lamp and turned to leave, I noticed the original light bulb halfway sticking out from under a couch pillow. I picked up my pace, chose to say nothing, and I left. I made sure that he didn't see where I went, because I sure didn't want him to know that I lived there, or which apartment was mine. 30 minutes later, and the phone rings again. Of course, it's Joe. This time he would like extra coffee for in the morning. I tell him that I'm unable to get to the housekeeping supply room because the housekeeper accidentally took it home. Total lie, but I wasn't going back over there. He had legitimately scared me. He called 2 more times that night, but I changed my voicemail to the motel's information, and I let him leave a message. I never even checked them, bad customer service for my first night running the place alone, but I really didn't think my boss would entertain the idea of penalizing me after she heard the whole story. The next morning starts out as quiet as usual. I was running audit when Joe shows up at the door. I wasn't scared this time because one of my housekeepers was getting coffee in the kitchen, and I had people coming and going, checking out. Joe asked me to go to breakfast with him. I explained that I'm on the clock and have business to keep afloat for my boss, but thank you for the offer. I'm not sure exactly what went down in this next 2 hours, because I was working, but somewhere in there, Joe's car quit working. He was trying to go to the next town over, which is significantly bigger than my town, for one reason or another. Anyway, he starts getting unreasonably angry that his car won't start, and saying things like, "How am I supposed to do this without a car?" Then it dawns on him that there is a car dealership next door, and he starts off in that direction. But before he goes too far away, he sees me coming out of a room, and he says, "You're gonna marry me. Just wait and see. We're going to Vegas." All while smiling and chuckling. So I chuckled too, because there's no way he's being serious. I hoped. And I continued on with my day. About 5 hours pass, and I get a phone call from the dealership, asking if Mr. Logan had checked out. I said he was booked for one more night, and he proceeds to tell me that Joe took a car for a test drive, and was supposed to return in 30 minutes, but hadn't returned, and he isn't answering his phone calls. They asked if I could check his room to see if his belongings were still there, and I obliged. I opened his door after knocking with no response, and found the room completely destroyed. Papers all over the place, trash on the floor, pictures off the wall, the whole nine, but I wasn't sure if the papers were something he would come back for, or if he bailed and just left that stuff behind. Aside from the papers, the only other personal belongings were a pair of swim trunks and a pair of socks. Again, was that worth coming back for? So I tell the dealership that I'm not 100% sure he's coming back, and they call the police. After another couple hours, the police show up at the motel, Joe in tow. I had decided since he didn't pay until the next day, I would just leave his stuff there in case he returned, which I honestly did not think would happen. He goes in and starts taking his things out of his room. That's when the cop comes up to me, and being a small town, he knows me and he pulls me aside. He says, "Hey, you need to thank God every night that you're still alive, and well, and here." I said, "Okay, but what makes you say that?" He said, "That man had every intention of taking you with him tonight, and going somewhere you'd never be looked for in. I don't know that he would have let you live. He's a sick man. We are taking him for a psych evaluation, and then to the country to see if he's okay for general population." He then says I should call my boss and let her know what was happening, and maybe take my own vacation for a few days, just in case they can't make the car theft thing stick, since the dealership no longer wanted to press charges, given his psychological state, and that was technically the only law he broke. They also said they would have to patrol the motel every hour or so, to check on me if he is released. I was completely taken back by this whole ordeal, and to this day wonder how he planned on getting me out of there, and what he was going to do if he did. He was released after 24 hours, but I never saw him again, and I am okay with that. I'm going to put this in for context that will be useful later down the road. On March 10th, my very good friend committed suicide. I was on site with officers and a few close friends who showed up that day as well. It was really rough for me and many others, and still affects me to this day. Now to the story, and a quick note. I'm going to skip the sexual parts of the relationship, as it was a weird sexual experience for me that genuinely made me lose my sex drive. So back at the end of October, beginning of November, I dated this girl named Tina. She had such a crappy name that just fit completely with the crappy type of person she was. The girl was really something. She was your basic white girl, loud, unfunny, and always on TikTok trying to do those dances. Our first date rolled around and we went to our high school's football game, and she wouldn't try to meet up with me at the concession stand because she was genuinely intimidated by me for whatever reason. Then all of a sudden she basically wanted to be by me for the rest of the football game. She was extremely erratic in her behavior that day, and that should have been a first red flag for me. Later that night I was texting her, and she pressured me into telling her about what happened to my friend and what it made me feel like. Normally I'm a pretty open guy, but I just met this girl and didn't know what to think about her. So I gave in and I told her. Later that night she started talking about how nobody would miss her if she was gone. I didn't know how to react as my anxiety kicked in. I kept trying to tell her that people needed her, and soon I told her I loved her as a panicked response as things ramped up in her behavior. This was the first red flag I noticed, but in reality, I wish it was the second, and I wish I stopped talking to her after that football game. But now that I was believing that girl was suicidal, I really stuck with it. I played up an act of liking her for a few more weeks. My high school's homecoming was coming up, and I asked her to the dance. However, all my plans almost ended right there when she ran from me in the middle of the night and had her friend text me about how she was going to kill herself. It got real for me. I was so angry as I yelled at her over the phone, asking for her to tell me where she was. I told her that I was going to call the cops, but she insisted that I didn't. I was going about 60 on every single road. She kept telling me that the cliffside she had been sitting on would be great for jumping off and killing herself with. My rage and fear stirred up so hot that I started crying and screaming. I went numb. I found her due to the fact she was describing a woman who she thought was going to kidnap her or something. In reality, it was just a woman trying to get an owl out of the way of her car. So I slammed the brakes as soon as I saw the woman and the owl and jumped out of my car. I had tears in my eyes and rage in my blood as I begged this woman to help me find her. Soon I did, as I saw her outline in the near tree line. I basically had to drag this 5'2" person out of this ditch and put her in the back of my car. Immediately she switched from being sad to angry and was calling me insane and kicking the back of my seat like a child. Later that night I was talking with my mom. I was telling her that I wanted to break up with her, and I almost did, but I was completely terrified of the fact that if I did, she may end up dead. She was in my head. I constantly worried about her. And on top of that, her friends came after me as well and her, to stir up more attention and drama, which they ate up like a pack of lions with their newly caught prey. Eventually, I did break up with her. However, as I found it was the right time and I built up the courage to do it, I was happy for once, and she was not. I felt powerful and in control of my actions again. I even stood up for myself when she tried to pin me as a sex addict and abuser, which was far from the case, and many people can confirm it. I told her how manipulative she was, and how crappy her two-faced friends were. I told her how delusional her reality was. We went in tandem with a side conflict I was having with another friend named Griffin. It turned out she and Griffin had not only been manipulating me and my friend's group, but were having an affair and screwing each other while I and Tina were dating. So many friends decided to fully cut these people off, and Griffin was gone from our lives, but Tina was not. She continued to send her goons after us and harass us. I was the main target, but my friend Anna took a beating due to the fact that she was the only other girl in the friend group. I had enough and told the principal about each incident in the hopes that she would be removed from the school. I told them I wanted her away from me and my friends as the harassment became worse and worse. It went from just insults over Instagram DMs to filming our conversation and listening in on us and using it as blackmail. They even tried to tear apart a relationship I was in with this girl from my history class, Selena. They didn't do anything but tell them to stop and then told me to stop, which I have no idea why, as I wasn't doing anything in particular. I took that quote-unquote advice and stopped. When she would harass us, I would just block them out, or if they harassed us in person, we made them out to be fooled as soon as they realized they couldn't get to us anymore. But quarantine happened and things became bad. Harassment picked up again, as they knew their school career couldn't be put on the line anymore, and I eventually got pictures of Tina and Griffin FaceTiming and sexting over it, as she flashed him and other things like that. I was disgusted. However, things slowed down as the 1 year of our friend's passing came up, and I just hoped it would be the end of it, as maybe a time of sadness would make them realize, but it sure didn't. I got a text last night from an unknown number at about 1 a.m. telling me I was a disgusting person and looked gross. I kept asking who it was, although I knew deep down who it really was. They were insulting me, and I insulted back, showing I wouldn't take any of their crap. I asked who it was again, and they said, "Someone who hates you." And I kept going. I told them that I didn't even know them, and they must be miserable to be texting someone they hate at 1 a.m. They texted me saying, "I know who you are," and I asked, "Well, who am I then?" Then they said my name, spelled perfectly, which is a rare occurrence, surprisingly. It's not even a hard name to say or spell. Then they went on to say things like, "Why did you hit me? You ruined my life." People thought my parents were abusing me, and then immediately switched to how they loved me and wanted me to be their wife, and how I was all of a sudden gay. None of this made sense, and I was genuinely afraid, as the erratic behavior was genuinely scary and concerning with some of the things they had said earlier. Soon it turned for the worst. They were telling me that they knew where I lived, and they were describing my house in perfect detail. I grabbed a baseball bat I kept next to my bed and ran downstairs and looked out the windows. It was pitch black, and my fight or flight instincts kicked in. As I stared out of the window trying to see any sort of shadow moving in the dark, my phone buzzed. They were in my backyard. I just texted "call me," but in reality I was in a panic, and I ran to the back windows, still pitch black, and our dim porch and backyard lights wouldn't help a thing. All I knew to do then was to call the police. 2 cars showed up at my house, and I and my parents stayed up a bit later until they left. I showed them the texts, and they asked if there was anyone who would threaten me or anything I did to anyone in the past that would result in this. I just told them about my crazy ex. I got a text about how boring I was and that they were blocking me. Not sure if it was related to the cops showing up making things lame for them, or because I started texting with no reactions whatsoever. Either way, things definitely went too far. I am a 26-year-old woman who has lived in Alaska my whole life. This will become important later when you see just how far this person would try to go and be with me. This all happened a few years back when I was in college. Like any woman at that age, I made a grave mistake of attempting online dating to disastrous consequences. I was using OkCupid to try and find a potential partner, but I also had it listed in my bio that I was looking for real friends. One day this girl, who we will call Jen, messaged me. She seems nice, and we got to talking and really hit it off. But I made it clear that at the time I wasn't looking for a relationship, due to being preoccupied with work and school. I should preface the rest of this story by saying that I like to help people, and it's really hard for me to not. Honestly, it's the biggest flaw I've had over the years, and was a contributing factor in multiple abusive relationships that I've been in before, and since this incident. Anyways, the result of this has been that I tend to drain myself to try and help others, and it attracts unsavory and unstable people. We started going into conversations about our various interests, and eventually we stumbled across gaming as a mutual interest. Jen suggested we play this new game, Ark Survival Evolved. It's a cursed ruin of a game that wasn't very well optimized for any system. To be honest, it was an absolute dumpster fire of a game, but at the time I thought it had a lot of potential. So I spent countless hours making various bases, in trading dinosaurs, and getting into the whole bit of brave explorer of a new world kind of thing. Jen and I spent a lot of time in the multiplayer, building things, and training dinos and talking and having a good time. During this time, she opened up to me about a lot of the abuse that she had suffered from past relationships and from a family that didn't accept her being gay. Having also been through some difficult times, I felt a lot of empathy for her. I would try to build her and talk her out of her self-hating talk when I had the energy to. This is when the trouble started, though. I noticed that she was being a bit too friendly with me and kept overly being sexual and flirty for a week or two. It started with in-game RP kind of stuff, where you do the asterisk kisses and hugs thing, and it was really just all too much. She was really nice, but totally not my type. I had addressed the situation multiple times, saying that it had made me feel very uncomfortable, but every time we had that conversation, Jen would tell me that she understood and she would back off. You know the drill, but it never really got through to her. By this time we had started having communications on a chat app called Telegram. I wasn't always on my computer, so seemed like a convenient solution. I've started noticing that a lot of the emojis she was using displayed a very similar lack of respect for my boundaries. Just as before, I had mentioned to Jen that it made me feel uncomfortable. I knew she had a lot going on upstairs, but me being me, I have always had a very gentle soul. It's always been very difficult for me to set firm boundaries, and to keep those, especially when somebody is suffering. One weekend was very packed with homework and a double shift at work, so I ended up getting home very late. I booted up the computer just to check some emails as I ate my dinner of top ramen before zonking out. When Steam loaded, I noticed that I had hundreds of missed messages and comments, all from Jen. I started from the top, and as I read through, things became progressively more and more out of control. By the time I was halfway through, every other message was either calling me names or threatening to kill herself if I didn't reply. I had seen enough, so I just sent a message that her behavior was unacceptable. But I can't be friends with somebody who is going to be abusive like this. I blocked her on Steam and on Telegram. And this is where it really hits the fan. About 30 minutes later, my phone starts going off. Mind you, this is about 12:30 a.m. Alaska time, so that would make it about 3 a.m. for her. She called my cell phone number with what she had saved from Telegram. She was absolutely out of control. From the moment I picked up the phone, she was screaming obscenities and slurs at me, interspersed with confessions of love and desperate pleas for me to unblock her so we could just be friends again, and that she would make it up to me and all that crap. I tried to explain to her that what she had done was out of line, and that I didn't have the emotional capacity to go through another abusive friendship, but she was having absolutely none of it. I did the only thing I could do. I ended the call and blocked the number. 5 minutes later, I get a call from an unrecognized, private number, and I pick up, knowing exactly what I was in for. It was her again, calling from her parents' landline. I immediately hung up. 15 seconds goes by and my phone rings again, and I dismiss the call. My phone rang about 5 minutes later from the same number. This goes on for a solid 15 minutes before I just turned my phone off and I went to bed. It was a fairly sleepless night, but thankfully the next day I had class in the evening, so I had an opportunity to sleep in. I woke up from an okay sleep and turned my phone on to find over 100 missed calls and about as many voicemails. I checked my Telegram to talk to a different friend about the chaos that was going on, to find new messages from 6 new accounts. Most of them were just walls of text, filled with some same out-of-control ramblings that she had said on the phone. They were the texts of someone who had completely lost it. All over the place in tone and message, switching back and forth between I love you and slurs, with little regard for spacing, punctuation, capitalization, or general legibility. I was horrified. I mean, I had seen my fair share of breakdowns, but never ones that impacted me directly. Then I get a phone call. Same unknown private number. Hoping she had calmed down enough to listen to reason, I picked up, and she started in sobbing and screaming unintelligibly at me, starting right back in. I got so mad and I screamed into the phone for her to shut up, and for the first time in what was probably about 14 hours, she did. Very clearly I told her to not call me again, and that she had gone way over the line, and that I wanted nothing to do with her after this. In a calm monotone that still makes me shudder to this day, she said, "What do I do to prove my love for you? Do you want me to kill myself? How about my dog? I can kill her for you." Honestly, I was so shocked, I just told her no, and that if she loved me, she would move on and get help. This was the worst possible answer. Immediately she started screaming again, so I just hung up and turned my phone off. She called me back constantly for the rest of the morning until I turned off my phone. The next day I went in and I got my number changed. Hopefully that would be the end of it. A few days passed and I'm at work. My boss comes over saying that I had a phone call from my mom. I thought nothing of it until I picked up the phone, and I heard Jen's voice on the other end. She started in talking about how she had been cutting herself, and how she would keep going until she was dead if I didn't unblock her. So I hung up the phone without a word. I told my boss to not bother me with phone calls unless it was from a known listed number on my emergency contact file. With my new phone, I set up Telegram again and started going through blocking all of her alternate accounts. But that still wasn't the end of it. For about 6 months after this whole thing went down, every few weeks I would get a new Telegram contact on a new number begging me to unblock her so we could be together. I know it's not some big climactic ending, but honestly, what could I do? All I knew of her at the time was her first name, her screen name, and her state. If I had reported it to the police, nothing would have been done anyways. The cops here don't take kindly to queer people like myself, so I just didn't want to risk any BS with them. And to Jen, the out-of-control person who was making my life miserable, I hope you gotten help. I truly do. I've been debating if I wanted to post this story, because it was so unnerving. However, with all this COVID-19 and quarantine, I figured that I might as well share a story in order to kill some time. For the past 2 years, I've been working at a haunted house attraction. It's a really fun gig, but the job does tend to attract some rather creepy individuals. For the last 2 years that I've worked there, there's always been some kind of creep that works there. I had one very creepy incident that happened my first year of working there, but this story in particular will recount my second year's creepy incident. I'll start with the story with orientation day. This is where we met all of the fellow actors and chose our roles. When I walked into the building, my heart fell to the pit of my stomach. A man who looked like the same creeper from my first year at the haunted house was waiting for orientation to start. But I knew that it couldn't possibly be the same man, because the man from my first year had killed himself months ago. And to make matters even stranger, this man even had the same name, Daniel. So I first thought that this was all just a wild coincidence. There was no way this man will also turn out to be a creep. But I was wrong. Allow me to describe Daniel. He was a man probably in his 40s or early 50s. He was a short and pudgy man. From the beginning, everyone could kind of tell that he was a little socially awkward, and there's nothing wrong with that. But he really did kind of creep me out, and most of the workers. Additionally, he couldn't drive, so he was either super early to work or very late, and he was usually the last to leave. So overall, he was a peculiar fellow. But hey, we were all working at a peculiar job. Orientation came and went without any issues, and soon the attraction started. To understand the story, let me explain where I was located in the attraction. I was located in a large maze outside of the main house with about 5 other guys, including Daniel. These 5 guys were scattered throughout the maze, and I was at the center in a large rectangular room. This room was enclosed, unlike the rest of the maze, and it had 2 exits. All of the guys besides Daniel were around my age, which was 18. Honestly, I don't even know whose brilliant idea it was to put a lone girl in a large maze with 5 guys. Thankfully, I was somewhat friends with one of the guys, so I didn't feel too alone. However, this friend was located at the tail end of the maze. Daniel was located decently close to my room, but that didn't bother me at first. There was no reason for Daniel or any of the other guys to enter my room. They all had their own positions to handle. One other thing to understand about this maze is that all of the actors were still able to see one another because the walls in the maze were relatively short. So despite being far away from my friend, I was still able to see him. Now I hope I explained that clearly. Nothing strange occurred the first 2 nights, but on the 3rd night, Daniel made his move. When no customers were going through the attraction, the actors would just walk around the maze or sit on the ground to relax. During these times, I would leave my room and either sit on the ground somewhere or enter the maze house to grab a water bottle. In order to enter the main house, I would have to go through the maze and past Daniel's area. The first few times I did this, Daniel said nothing and would just watch me. On the 3rd day, he finally mustered up the courage to say, "Hey, how are you?" Not thinking anything of it, I happily replied and carried on to fetch a water bottle. From then on, any time I passed him, he would always have some comment. It was harmless things at first, like, "Oh, you're really good. The weather's nice out here. You're a pretty scary actor." So other than him having to say something, I really didn't think too much of it. Days continued on, and Daniel kept getting a little braver. In between breaks, he would awkwardly walk towards the center of the maze. He moved really slow, like he was trying to be stealthy. My only saving grace was that before he could reach my room, a group of customers would begin to approach, and he would have to run back to his position. This is when alarm bells started to ring. I knew there was no reason for Daniel to leave his position and come to mine. Now, whenever I saw that he was motioning towards my room, I would go out the other direction in hopes to put more distance between us. It didn't help that he was dressed in a scary costume and wearing a mask. This only added to the tension. On the times where I chose to sit on the ground and wait for customers, Daniel would go through the maze and stand where a single wall separated us. Looking back, I should have just walked away, but I didn't want to come off as a rude teenager. This is when he introduced himself, even though we already did that on orientation day. Trying to play nice, I introduced myself and we shook hands. Then he said the words that I'll never forget. "You're beautiful." This caught me off guard, that all I could say was, "I'm sorry?" He then repeated himself and kept his gaze locked on me. I very awkwardly replied, "Thanks," and refused to make eye contact with him. Keep in mind I'm an 18-year-old girl, and he's a man in his 40s, maybe 50s. I'm also covered in sweat, mud, and fake blood. Thoroughly creeped out, I was now determined to avoid him at all costs. Whenever we had breaks, I now went through the maze in the opposite direction of Daniel in order to get to the main house. It was a longer route, but it was worth it. And Daniel soon noticed this, and now put more of an effort in walking towards my room between breaks. There were several times where he actually entered the room, but thankfully I had the wits to leave the room entirely and go stand out where my friend was. Daniel would just stand in my room, look around, and one time he sat down on the floor. It was actually comical sometimes to see him standing in my room, realize customers were coming, and then rush out of there and back into his position. Sadly, with how dark the maze was, I couldn't always keep a sharp eye on Daniel's whereabouts. There was one incident where he approached me unexpectedly and said, "I like the way you scream." One of my lines that I said in the attraction to customers was, "You can't leave me, I need you." And Daniel just absolutely ate that up and loved it. Well, you can bet after he said that he liked me, that line I stopped using. I had to endure a month of this, but over time Daniel got the message that I was not interested. In retaliation, he began to steal my scare points. There were certain areas near my room that I would pop out of and scare customers. These scare points were accessible to the other actors, but no one else used them but me. I suppose Daniel was mad that I wasn't giving him any attention, so he decided to steal my scare points as revenge. He also began to copy some of my lines. Thankfully, towards the end of the haunt season, the managers of the attraction moved me inside the main house. I'm not sure why, because I didn't say anything to them about Daniel, even though I know I should have. So for the final days working there, I was nowhere near Daniel. When the season ended, I was relieved. However, the managers had the bright idea to open a Christmas-themed haunted house, and they asked me to work out. I loved the job and didn't plan on having a creep ruin it for me. Although many actors from the Halloween season didn't return for the Christmas attraction, Daniel was not one of them. He was there, and boy was he thrilled to see that I returned as well. This time, however, I convinced my best friend to work there. So with my best friend being there, she sort of acted as a deterrent for Daniel. Throughout the whole season, he never approached me. Well, that was until the final night. My friend and I were chilling in one of the rooms and waiting on customers. This room was the first room in the attraction, so everyone else was passing through in order to get to their positions. Daniel began to pass through, then suddenly turned back around to face my friend and me. Again, with those beady, never-blinking eyes, he said, "I think you two are beautiful." I just cringed and looked away, as my friend shyly replied, "Thank you." So overall, Daniel is pretty creepy, but I suspect that maybe he doesn't know what he's doing wrong. I don't think he really realizes that flirting with young girls and trying to be in a room alone with them is okay. I caught word that he might be autistic, but I don't know for sure. But the feeling of dread I had in that maze is a feeling that I'll never forget. In retrospect, I should have told somebody. I kept telling myself that if Daniel did one more thing or tried to enter my room again, that I would tell the managers. One thing I can think of that at least lightens the mood is that his costume was literally Tree Man. His mask was just a tree with a contorted, scary face. Many customers would walk by, they would all shout, "Hey look, it's Groot." It got a laugh out of me every time. So Daniel, maybe you're just looking for love, but you're looking in all the wrong places, man. The course of events in this story happened from 2007 to 2012. However, the actual terrifying encounter in this story happened exactly on 2012, 2 years after my graduation. So like others who cannot get over with their horrifying encounters, you're not alone, since that encounter still remains fresh in my mind until now. Before we start with the story, let me tell you a short history about my father and his family's struggle and life in the early days as an immigrant in U.S. My family currently lived in Pennsylvania, Lancaster to be exact, but before that my paternal side hails from Romania. They migrated to U.S. in 1964. My paternal grandfather fled to the West during the last days of World War II. He was not a soldier nor a collaborator during the war. Being just a regular civilian, he fled to the West due to the widespread bombings. He also feared of getting killed since their house was already damaged by a bomb during an air raid in 1944. Luckily, they survived. When he fled, he was already married and had one kid who was my oldest paternal uncle. They settled and lived in France for 19 years. My paternal grandpa went into several jobs to earn money there. My dad, along with his siblings, were also born and raised there. By the time when they finally migrated to the U.S., my father was just 5 years old. My dad was the fourth out of 5 children. After migrating to the U.S., they arrived in New York, penniless. They experienced being homeless, beggars in the streets for days, until my paternal grandfather, along with his older son, my uncle, went into several jobs until they were able to make much money and rent an apartment. My paternal grandmother also found a job as a cleaner in various parks, and usually my father, along with his 2 older sisters, my paternal aunts, and his younger brother, my younger paternal uncle, would come there to help her. After that, my father, along with his siblings, would study and work there for a long time. They were all able to finish primary and secondary education. To be short, they became working students during their time there studying. My dad, along with his siblings, also studied college there. They were lucky enough to finish their studies and find a stable job. My dad planned on applying as a teacher after moving to another state, since education was his course on college. Unfortunately for his brother, he didn't finish his education due to his vices. Instead of using his money to enroll in the college, he would use it to drink in the bar, buy cigarettes, and the worst, he used it to buy drugs. Sometimes he would even get into fights with his older siblings, including my dad, for allegedly stealing their cash to use it for his own luxury. They really feel sorry for him. After their parents found out what's happening to him, they forced him to rehabilitate himself for the longest time and was only able to walk free by 1981 from the rehabilitation center. Like he promised to them, he had already changed for the better by the time he was released. Destiny also gave him a second chance. He was able to find a stable job and meet a woman who gave him all the love and time when they got married. It would take years for my father and his family to find a comfortable life. His 3 siblings did move to other states. However, my paternal grandfather and grandmother decided to just move into Plattsburgh. My younger paternal uncle also decided to live so close to them so he can keep an eye on them since they are already old. My father would finally move to Pennsylvania in '85. His other siblings moved as early as 1983. He settled and lived in Lancaster, and he also found a job there as a school teacher. Soon after, he will meet and date my mom there until they got married. When I was a kid, Romanian language became the first language for me, since I was always close with my dad. I admit I am a daddy's boy. My mom, however, was very busy. My mom, however, was always busy with her work as a nurse in a hospital, while my dad just worked as a high school teacher. I grew up with no siblings, so honestly, I was the only child, and it was so boring for me, since I don't have a younger brother or sister to play and interact with. It took several years for me to fully understand and learn how to speak English. Honestly, that was hard. During elementary, I am a total loner. I don't have any friends. And the worst part is I was ridiculed whenever I tried to speak English, since I was always stuttering whenever I tried to do it. So to be simple, I can compare myself to an alien during my childhood. A kid with no friends, a kid who was always a whipping boy, and a kid who had nothing to defend himself from the judgments he received. My parents were always here for me though, so even when I get bullied, there would be somebody there who could stand up for me. I don't want to bring back all the harm on those kids. By that time I just wanted to live in peace and harmony along with them, so I just ignored the bullies. As time passed by from 4th to 6th grade, I was able to make some friends since my parents noted to my advisor that I had troubles about communicating in English. Luckily, like a gift from heaven, my mom had a friend who was fluent in Romanian. He volunteered to translate what I'm saying without asking any payment in exchange. So he became my interpreter until I was able to fully speak and understand English. At least my stress had been reduced when I was in 4th to 6th grade, since my parents explained my problem to the school authorities, so they allowed my mom's friend to translate what I'm saying while at school every day. My advisors every school year knew about my situation. They were good and kind to me. My classmates also knew my problem, and they seemed to be good and humble to me as well. My bullying experiences also started to dwindle as those kids who bullied me received a hard-earned lesson from the school authorities. During that time, my parents also enrolled me to an English tutorial school. The schedule of classes there was every weekend. I would frequently attend the school mostly on summer. Most of the kids who attended that school were the same as me. They also can't speak and understand English. When I was in high school, my abilities to communicate and understand English seemed to improve well. Now I was able to make friends easily, but I would still stutter sometimes, which would make some students laugh. But I no longer experienced bullying that much since I was a consistent honor student until I finished high school. In 2007, when I was 19, I moved to Harrisburg to study college. I'll be spending 4 years studying there. Due to privacy reasons, I won't mention the name of the college I went to. During my first month there, life was absolutely great. I lived in a dormitory along with other male students, since our dorms are separated from girls. Our class had many activities to deal with during the first month, so it was hard for me to have some time to talk with my parents or relax. I also felt stressed and pressured at first, but I soon realized that I will grow up and become more responsible when dealing with our activities. The campus also housed some students with strange and weird personalities. I could tell that I had several encounters with odd students. Some encounters are funny, but some are also sketchy. But I accepted the fact that all of us in the campus had different personalities. I made a lot of friends during my first year. One of them was Terry, who became my best friend during most of the college years. Bullying is not an issue on the campus, since the system was very good. I also started to actively participate in school clubs or extracurricular activities in the campus, a thing that would make me more socialized. When going back to my hometown and enjoying time with my family, it only happens fully on summer. However, on summer breaks, or holidays like Christmas break, we usually spent our time working on projects and presentations while at home. On weekends, we are not spared from every activity and assignment, so we usually spend weekends typing on laptops and researching rather than relaxing and having time with our families. In 2008, when I was a sophomore in college, I met this girl named Laura, who has recently transferred to the university. I met her when Terry and I went to the girls' dormitory, as he talked with her girlfriend, Christine. By that time, Laura happens to be Christine's roommate, and they were both friends as well. During our stay there, Laura began asking me several questions, like, do I have a girlfriend? She also stated how she would like to date a boy like me. I can say that she's clearly into me, but my main focus, by that time, was my studies. I also claimed that she is only kidding at the time, so I just continued to answer her questions as simple as I could, without making a sign that I was interested in her. I've never had a girlfriend, but I planned on getting one after I graduated. But by that time, there was a long road for me to walk. A day passed by, and I became a topic on Laura's friends. She apparently told her friends about me, and yes, I became a hot topic to them. Meanwhile, Terry and I decided to not say it out loud. We just decided to tell a few trusted friends. However, as time went by, Laura started texting me. She was able to get my number via Terry. Actually, he had my phone number, since we were close friends, We have been ever since my first year in college. But believe me, it was upsetting at first, since it was sensitive information, but I managed to accept it, as my best friend provided a deep explanation for me to understand. I admit at first it was hard to talk to her, since I'm busy on my studies and I don't have any interest on flirting with her, but I lately realized that I shall grab the opportunity, as Terry told me that Laura is really serious on flirting with me, so I made a life-changing decision. When I texted her back, we started talking on the phone about various things about love. After that, we started meeting in person until we started dating, and officially she became my girlfriend after several dates. During our relationship, we both exchanged questions to each other. To be exact, she asked me where I lived. I told her that I lived in Lancaster, while she told me that she lived somewhere else. It was normal since people who engage in relationships wouldn't expect to have their hometown asked by their fellow partner. I started meeting her every day. Her calls and texts would become more prevalent than usual. She also introduced me to her friends. They seemed to like me, and I was able to get along with them. As time passed by, I started to know more about her. However, she was starting to become overprotective in our relationship, and she also started to become annoyed whenever I failed to meet her on time. At first it was nothing, since I knew that girls like her wanted a good relationship. However, as time passed by, I decided to talk about my time on my studies. At first she was upset, but the deeper I explained to her, convinced her to approve my decision. Our relationship continued on the course of the college years without any conflict, but only short arguments. But everything started to get out of hand during our fourth and final year of college. She changed a lot during the final year. She became paranoid to the extreme, doubtful, and envious. She would also start arguments, even inside the campus, which would turn into a scene. It was very embarrassing for me. So one time I decided to become distant to her and focus more on my studies. However, one night while I was studying, I heard a knock on my door. My roommate was already asleep, so I assumed it must be Terry, so I opened it. However, I was wrong. It was Laura standing straight in the doorway. She had this look on her face while looking towards me. She began asking why I started to distance away from her. I explained everything to her, and that was it. She angrily left my dormitory without any words. I can even tell that she didn't even listen to what I said. One time while I was heading to my room after the end of our last subject, I saw her inside when I entered. She was vandalizing the room, and to make matters worse, she had been writing something in big letters that said, "You are going to pay for this," on the walls. The sign was written in red. The letters looked like they were almost drawn in blood, and that creeped me out. I immediately took her outside to confront her, but she started to make a scene. It only stopped when the school authorities intervened. Afterwards, I explained everything to them, and it became sufficient evidence for Laura to be suspended for 1 week. My roommate and I relocated to another room in the dorms, since our previous room was cleaned up. However, the cleaners found broken glass under my bed while cleaning. Now I knew that she was up to no good with her intentions. After that, Laura started messaging me on my phone. The messages ranged from her deep explanations to profanities. She even started threatening me, which is creepy and far disturbing for me. So I had enough, and I decided to block her number. But it doesn't end there. The incident really changed my perspective on Laura, but I'm thankful that I saw her true colors that shined very bad. After her suspension ended, I decided to break up with her. She didn't say any words at all, but her face looked as sick as a parrot, and she didn't show up for several days. I apologized to her when I broke up with her, but I also felt sorry for her, since I felt that she might be depressed. But as days passed, I saw her on the campus. She continued to attend classes. However, I didn't see her being accompanied by her friends. That made me think that our breakup was also a big impact on her friendship with her friends. However, I didn't expect that she would also use the social media to pour her anger into me. One time while I was surfing Facebook, I saw a post from Laura that shows my pictures. The post's captions had profanities. Those were intended to insult, so I had enough. I reported the post and blocked her on Facebook. I already had enough with her immaturity, so I did just the right thing. After our breakup, I gained the courage to talk to Terry and my friends. I decided to reconcile with them. Our relationship as brothers started to deteriorate when I started dating Laura, so I apologized to them. They accepted my apology and welcomed me back to the squad. One time I decided to ask Christine about Laura. She said that she didn't really move on, and it made things worse. That's the reason why she requested another roommate to replace Laura. According to Christine, Laura's obsession to me caused her to be imprisoned in a quagmire. So to be simple, she became a prisoner of her own woes and misery. She changed a lot after the breakup. She would cry for the longest time, and sometimes she would swear uncontrollably inside the room. She also became delusional after our breakup. She continued to live in fantasy while denouncing the reality. Laura also started to show her darker side on them. She would get into fights with other students. She would even make threats. She also started to talk about dark and creepy stuff, which scared her friends. Scratch marks also appeared on her arm, which made her friends speculate that she's going to kill herself anytime. So they confronted her, but it didn't help since she also became violent. She started throwing her objects violently, and she would even harass Christine and her friends. This caused them to distance themselves from Laura. Those things shocked me a lot. I expect that she will realize her wrongdoings and change for the best, but I was wrong. She changed for the worst. Afterwards, I didn't hear much about Laura. She didn't try to talk to me. In fact, she was always alone. She never even apologized to her friends, and it looked like she didn't have any interest on having friends anymore. Months passed by and I finally graduated. I was able to erase those bad memories on my mind and move on. After graduation, I decided to go back to Lancaster, where I would start my new life. Most of my friends who live in Harrisburg went to enjoy their new life by partying, while others went on vacation. My other friends who lived outside the city, meanwhile, returned back to their hometowns, where they celebrated their achievement with their family. All of them would celebrate before they would go into job hunting. Christine moved in with Terry. They both lived in one roof in the suburbs of Harrisburg. I stayed in contact with my friends. However, I didn't receive any news about Laura. I expect her to change and finally move on. Meanwhile, after summer, I went into a job hunting like other grads did. I was lucky enough to find a stable job in my hometown. The salary is good, my fellow coworkers are friendly, and my boss is not a jerk, which is a plus. And I easily got promoted due to my skills. I also decided to move out of my parents' house as I bought a new house to live in. I really expected that my life would be peaceful now. Laura's past actions were not a big concern for me now. I already planned on facing the future and not reversing on the past, and so I did. However, my expectations for a peaceful life was wrong. That doesn't end there. One evening after a long, stressful day at work, I was driving back to my home when I received a call from an unknown number. When I picked it up, there was just this breathing sound in the other end, so I hung up since I knew it was just a prank caller. However, when I was already at home, the number wouldn't stop calling, only for me to hear the same breathing sound on the other end. I then blocked the number and went to sleep. That morning I saw something in the mailbox outside my house. The mail contained these words, "I don't forgive and I don't forget," written in red. That reminded me of what Laura wrote on the walls of our room, but I threw it in the garbage since I knew it was just a prank from some kids. One afternoon, since my shift had already ended, I decided to go home. However, before I could even park my car in the garage, I saw this mail at the top of my mailbox. By this time it said, "You can't run, you can't hide, you can't escape," written in red again. I decided to ask my neighbor about that mail in my box. He said that he saw a car hours ago pulling over on the side of the road, directly in my house. Then he saw a girl that went out, and she placed mail on top of the mailbox. That's when my heart dropped. That night I had so many questions. I knew it was Laura, but how could she know where I lived? My mind is full of questions until I received a call from a random number. I picked it up, and I heard a familiar voice saying, "Go outside, I have a gift for you." That's when I was shocked. It was Laura telling me to go out, but how could she possibly trace where I lived? That's my biggest question of all time. I made a deep breath and went out on my house, yelling for her to show up, but I was greeted by an eerie silence outside. Not a single car or person passed by the streets by that time. But then, I heard a glass shattering behind me. When I looked back, I saw my front window broken. I was very angry at that point. I knew it was Laura, and I'm ready to confront her without knowing the dangers behind. I can't see anything, so I decided to check my window. As I went back to go inside my house, a rock hit me on the head. It nearly knocked me unconscious. That didn't stop there though. There were rocks hitting me. It came from the woods, which is very close and parallel to my house. I got seriously hurt, so I dashed towards the front door and I slammed it shut. Then I saw pieces of broken glass on the floor. A brick was also on the floor. It had a saying, "You made the wrong choice." I had enough and I called the police and explained the whole situation to them. Before the police arrived, I decided to take a peek to know if it was Laura, so I slowly opened my door since I had no peephole, but I was surprised when a brick suddenly landed on my front porch, and then I shut the door and waited for eternity. The police quickly arrived. I heard them yelling at someone. I then seeked through the broken windows to see the officer storming through the woods, since my house was the very last on the block, and the place is surrounded by trees. After minutes of waiting, the officers knocked on my door. I immediately opened it. They told me that they saw someone behind a tree near the side street before they got out of the car. The person is wearing all black. It also dashed back to the woods when the officers yelled at it. As they chased it, they ended up not finding the person. I told them exactly about my speculations about the person they saw, but they said that they could not just arrest a person without proper evidence. It was also hard for them to identify whether it was Laura or another person, since the person they saw was wearing all black. I gave the brick with the sign to the officers so they can turn it into evidence, and after that they told me to call them if something happened again, and they left. The next few days nothing happened until one Friday night, while I was watching TV, I heard a hard thud coming from my front door. It sounded like a rock, so I decided to open the door for me to see another brick with a sign on it. The sign said, "I can see you." That creeped me out a lot, and when I looked on the street, there was this white SUV parked directly on the other side street parallel to my house. I decided to confront whoever was there, but when I looked inside the SUV, it was blurred, so I could not make up who was in there, or was it Laura or just another person. I decided to go back inside and close the door. As I felt sleepy, I decided to turn off everything. I went upstairs to my bedroom and I fell asleep shortly. I woke up by 2:15 a.m. in the morning. Strangely, the power was gone, so my aircon is turned off, and it was hot, so I went to find out if there was a blackout, but there isn't, as my neighbor's lights downstairs were turned on. Now there must be someone who turned off the power switch that's in my basement. When I went out, it was very dark at all corners by that time, so I fetched my flashlight from my room and used it as I went downstairs. I saw that both front door and back door are closed, so I went to the basement. My basement had a door outside, however it has no lock, so someone could have broken in and turned the power off. As I went down to the basement, I switched the power on, and all the electricity in the house is back once again, but the light also in the basement opened for me to see someone hiding behind the boxes. When I saw who that guy was, my heart dropped. It was Laura. She was wearing a white dress. Her face is unrecognizable since it had bruises all over. Her skin is pale white, and she was like the girl on the ring. She is not that Laura that I met in college, but she is something way worse. My heart started racing as she smiled and asked in a persuading voice, "I wanted to be with you again. Can we?" I then aggressively yelled, "No! Get out of here or I'm calling the cops." She stood and started walking towards me, while also looking to my soul. She then pulled something on her back. It was a gun, and she tossed one box on the floor, only for me to see her deranged obsession on me. It was all pictures of me on a collage scattered in the ground. She said that it was her intention to bring all of those with her in my basement. She also admitted into breaking into my room several times while I was in college. She then took one picture, and it was the picture of me sleeping in my room in the dormitory. She showed it to me and said, in a kidding voice, "You are such a handsome guy, but you wasted such a beautiful diamond like me, so I'm going to make sure that your life is going to be a waste too." She then tore my picture into pieces and aimed the gun at me. I easily evaded it as she fired one shot that could surely wake my neighbors. I then dashed upstairs and tried to lock the basement door, only to fail as she fired another shot. It almost hit me, so I left it wide open as I quickly dashed upstairs, back to my bedroom. I locked my door and hid in my closet. At first I heard her footsteps going room to room until it stopped at my door. She tried to open the door, but it was locked, so she began pounding and yelling in a frantic voice for me to open the door. Then there was a brief silence until she used enough force to break the door down. She began searching the whole room with her gun still drawn. Luckily she passed my closet. She looked on my bed, but since the closet was behind her, I picked up my baseball bat inside the closet, which I always use for self-defense, and I took a deep breath. Since my closet door doesn't make that loud sound when I open or close it, that was not a problem anymore, but I still slowly opened the door and tiptoed silently to make sure that her attention wouldn't be drawn to me. Luckily she didn't hear any noise, since she was just standing and staring at my bed like a statue. So before she could even stare back at me, I took another deep breath and presumed to hit her back with my baseball bat as hard as I could. It knocked her unconscious. I then tied her up to a chair so she couldn't escape. I called the police and I took her gun. The police arrived shortly. They entered my house. By that time, Laura started to regain her consciousness as she was handcuffed by the police. However, she began threatening me and even tried to attack me, but she ended up being tackled by the police officers. After that, I pressed charges against her. However, during her trial, she was declared mentally insane due to her behavior in the courtroom. This led her to be sent to a mental asylum instead. It was not a major concern for me anymore since the asylum had a strong and maximum security, so it would only be a pain on her if she tried to escape. Laura apparently had a mental disorder that encompasses extreme obsession, which is dangerous when left uncontrolled. She went into a psychiatric therapy during the course of her trial to determine if she was actually mentally insane. My friends and family knew the incident. I recount one time when I met with Terry and Christine in a bar. They explained Laura's ultimate fate after the graduation. She was apparently missing for 12 days after the graduation. Her older brother began contacting her friends, including them, but they didn't know where she went. However, one student did contact her brother and said that she was last seen in a bar, drinking. This concerned her brother very much, so he filed a missing persons report. However, he didn't receive any news after that. However, one fateful morning, she returned home crying apparently. She walked kilometers to reach her home, and she slept in the streets for days. The reason? Her wallet was stolen in the bar, as she was drunk by that time. She arrived home penniless. Months passed by, and her brother started to witness her strange behavior. So he urged her to consult a psychologist, but she refused. Her brother was really concerned about her, so he still forced her to do so. This resulted in a conflict between them. After that, she left suddenly one morning, without leaving any mail, as her brother woke up and didn't see her anywhere in the house. He began coordinating with the police to track her down, but all of their efforts unfortunately failed. During her trial, Laura confessed in the courtroom that the firearm she brought that night was owned by her brother. Apparently, she stole the gun on her brother's drawer while he was sleeping that night, before her departure. She also admitted that she was behind on those phone calls, all the mail, and the bricks being thrown at me. I recently found out that she was able to trace me by having some of my personal information. While we were still dating, I decided to give her some of my personal information. I gave her my phone number and told her where my hometown was, since I trusted her very much by that time. When I moved into my new house, she was still able to track it by simply asking one of my neighbors if they know me. Of course they knew me, so it was a piece of cake for her to find where I lived. Honestly, one small mistake that I made almost killed me, yet I'm lucky enough to dodge this bullet. From now on, I wouldn't trust a person easily. I would observe the behavior and personality before I could fully trust them. I would also become more private of my personal information, so I won't end up witnessing a random guy breaking into my house. I had just turned 15, and it was the end of the summer. My parents were working. They were administrative and monetary consultants, and my brother was in basketball practice. So I was home alone with my puppy while watching TV. The phone rang. I said, "Hello?" A feminine voice answered and said, "Hello? Are you Martha's son?" Yes. My name is OP. Who asks? "Oh, it's Janice. Your mom and I have been working together for 5 years." I have never seen or heard Janice. My parents have always kept their jobs and personal lives miles apart, but I knew who she was. My mom always spoke about her. She was the personal assistant of one of the owners. "Oh, Janice? My mom's not here right now. What can I help you with?" "Oh, I'm sorry, but Mr. Delgado called me. Your mom and dad are in court. They seem to be in trouble, and he is just arriving there. A fraud allegation," he said. "They can't call due to the legal proceedings, but can I have your cell phone number? Mr. Delgado will call you right away, so he can explain better." "Yeah, sure. My number is 123-456-789. "Don't worry, I'm sure it's nothing serious. Take care." And she ended the call. Don't worry. I was scared. My mom and dad would never commit a crime. Or I didn't think so. Maybe this was a misunderstanding. Before I continue, I must clarify some things. Mr. Delgado was another name I knew, this time thanks to my dad. He was a junior associate in the same place my parents and Janice worked. And as far as my parents' conversation went, he was a very capable lawyer. My cell phone rang. It was a male voice. "Hello, is this OP?" "Yeah, Mr. Delgado?" "Yeah, kid, listen to me. We're in quite the trouble. I'm here in the court. Your parents are being prosecuted for tax evasion and financial fraud. I am working with bare minimum here, and the judge won't let me talk to them, so I need your help. This is a thunder case, so if we don't work fast, we could be in serious problems." "What? But my parents would never do anything like that. We haven't done anything illegal." "OP, I believe you. I know you are scared, but listen to me. I need your help so you can help mom and dad, alright?" Almost crying, I said I will try. "Have your parents made some really big purchases recently? Property, a car maybe? House items like a TV, computer, fridges, anything like that? Anything that could set the government alarms about illegal money movement?" "Well, my dad bought me a computer for my birthday, and my brother got a new iPad. He may have used my dad's credit card." "Oh, that's great. That could be part of it. Anything else?" "Not that I can remember. Maybe they just took an extra large sum of cash from the bank. Do you have access to the safe? Your dad said you have one." "Safe? We don't have a safe. Not one that I'm aware of. I don't know what you're talking about." "Darn, I thought he told you about it." "Maybe it's because you're too young. Your brother didn't know either." "Have you talked to Josh? I was gonna call him, but he rarely answers when he's playing." "Yeah, Janice spoke to him before calling you. OP, you can't call your brother nor your parents. These kind of procedures are very sketchy. Your parents' cell phones are held by the police, and I'm sure they are going to track calls. They won't track mine or Janice's because we're their lawyers, but yours are not safe. So please answer only if it's just the two of us. Janice's number is this, and this is mine. Understand?" Yes, sir." "Okay, I'll call you later. Take care." He hung up. I was scared. I didn't know what to do. Couldn't call anyone. And I just found out my dad was keeping a secret safe from me. What the heck? Since when did my parents manage that kind of money? I waited for an hour. I was just about to call Mr. Delgado when I received a call. The number was Janice. "OP, sweetie, how are you?" I'm fine." "Oh, baby, don't cry. We're going to solve this together. I know this is going to end well. Mr. Delgado was able to speak with your dad, Philip, and they had made a deal with the prosecution. They were going to do a home check to see if there's not any stolen or fraudulent assets, and all of this will be over." "Oh, okay, that's amazing, Janice." I know, but that brings us another problem. These break-ins are sometimes done by crooked people, and they will take anything they consider valuable as evidence, and will never return it. Your mother fears they will do that, especially to her jewelry, and most importantly, her wedding ring. You need to take it all out, including the computers. We already told the judge about them, and he discarded them as the case. But we don't know if the agents will respect that verdict. Mr. Delgado is going to pick the things up." I said, "But wait, I don't know where my mom keeps her jewels or her wedding ring." Janice said they must be in her room. Just look for those you can save. Worry about those that could look suspicious. Okay, but does Mr. Delgado know where I live? Yes, sweetie. He will wait for you in the park on the other side of the street. Be ready in 30 minutes. She hung up, and I did what I was told. I went to my house, searching for anything that looked expensive, and put it in my backpack. I was able to find Mom's ring and other gold jewels. I also packed my brother's laptop and my old computer. Better be safe, I thought. I went to the park and I waited. Mere minutes later, a black SUV made a turn and parked in the other side. A bald man in a suit came out and made signs. When I came close, about 3/4 of the distance between us, my survival instinct finally kicked off. I said, Mr. Delgado? Yes, boy, it's me. That voice on the cell phone, no doubt about that. But there was something off. Mr. Delgado was a junior associate, and my father always said how he was an intelligent young man that would go very far. The guy in front of me was at least in his 40s, not young at all. I stopped, so the man came closer. He said, is there a problem? Are you all right? His fatherly tone was almost enough to put my guards down, almost. No, I'm fine. Well then, let's go. Your parents are waiting. Sorry, what? Where are we going? To court, obviously. You can't be here when the police does the checkup. The alarm has gone off in my head and its volume was just increasing. In that moment I finally started putting pieces together. Mistakes in their story, some illogical points they have made. This was wrong. There was something wrong in here. I needed to get away from there as fast as I could, but there was a problem. Mr. Delgado had company. I could see in the SUV there was another man in the driving place. The park was totally empty, and my house was not too far away for a sprint. No one in the streets either. I was alone, until I remembered I was not. Mr. Delgado looked at me very suspiciously, like he knew something had changed. Kid, let's go. I said, oh, my puppy. What? I can't leave my puppy alone, he's just a few months old. But I need to go for him, it's important. We don't have time for the dog. I was making time. I needed him to believe I was still in his game until someone arrived in the area. It was still a public park in summer. It was bound to happen sooner or later, more likely sooner. I think he knew the same. Whoever he was, he knew he couldn't stay long in the open. Fine. Go for the puppy, but give me the backpack. It looks heavy. It will only make you slower. I didn't want to give it to him, but I did. It would at least appease him somehow. If I refused, who knows what he could do. And I went away. I didn't run. I just walked, trying to keep the charade, until I was sure the distance between us was enough. And I speed up. Never have I ran that fast. I didn't know it was possible for me to go that fast. As I was getting farther, I could hear the SUV engine as it started and went its way. I stopped. I was in front of my house and broke apart. I was crying. I shouted, scared, sad, mad. How could I be that stupid? My neighbor heard me and came at that moment. She must have thought I was having a panic attack. Well, maybe I was, and she hugged me, trying to calm me down. I told her everything, and she was the one who called my mom. My mom was at our house in 15 minutes after that and hugged me so tight I was still terrified, and it would still be a long time after the incident. And I still would be, even for a long time after that incident. To this day, I'm unable to answer a phone call of an unknown number without feeling a pain in my stomach. And in general, I hate phone calls. Only text is what I say to everyone I meet. I gave away the equivalent of $5,000 in electronics, jewels, and some spare cash I had found. I gave away my mom's wedding ring and 2 family heirlooms. I gave away my birthday present and the iPad my brother had spent all year saving for. In that moment, I just hated myself. I hated that I was tricked so easily. Even if my family said the most important thing was that I wasn't hurt, I still saw the pain on losing all the material things, especially Mom. That hurt me the most. With time, we were able to understand that this was a very long game we have been involved for months. How did they know my parents' co-workers' names and jobs? My mom lost a flash drive with lots of documents some weeks prior. She believes on the bus, with a lot of job information. Nothing legal, mostly administrative. It is also likely that they got our home telephone from one of those documents. How did they know where we lived? That summer we had received a lot of calls from different services. Ex-bank, ex-cell phone line, ex-public service to verify data. Most of the time it was my brother who answered, sometimes my mom or me. We understood that under the pretext, they were able to obtain not only our address, but they verified my parents' name. How did they know I was alone so they could trick me? Same method, with their almost daily calls. They knew who was at home and what time, and were able to pinpoint that most Tuesdays and Thursdays I was left in the house with nobody else, not even my brother. I also believe they had come to the area at some time, as they knew the park had no security cameras, and that my mom did not use her ring. They created this whole story, almost perfect, but it still had flaws. First, the one that saved me, Mr. Delgado's age. Second, I forgot my mother had just been working in the buffet for 3 years. It was impossible she met Janice 5 years prior. Third, the safe thing. Obviously a general assumption. They may believe every person has one. Fourth, I found weird Mr. Delgado was acting as my parents' lawyer when my uncle, my dad's brother, had always been the one in charge of small legal problems that we had. And fifth, all of their legal chit-chat. I didn't really know our legal system that well, but it's almost impossible that you're taken suddenly to court and judged in less than a day without being able to establish a defense. This is just what I can remember. As this was almost 12 years ago, my conversations with Janice and Mr. Delgado were longer, and I know I had seen more holes in their story. Once I reviewed them without panic, sadly I saw through their lies too late, and when I was already in a very bad position. I was a victim of the millionaire call, a method in which criminals manipulate the most naive and vulnerable people in a household, using an emotional bargain so that they will willingly give up their things or even themselves. The thieves were never caught. The phones they used were fake ones, and without camera footage, the police had nothing to work with. There were no fingerprints or similar because they didn't touch anything that I kept. I was not able to see the SUV plate due to the distance, and Mr. Delgado was an average guy without any identifiable marks. The only good thing that happened that day was that I didn't enter their car. Maybe I won't be writing this if I did. We lived in fear that they would reappear someday, as they knew our address. But thank God it didn't happen, and I hope it stays that way. I have a few frightening stories to tell, but this one is playing out right now, so I thought I would share it with you. Last May, my husband, myself, and our 2 small boys left our farm in the country and we moved into a posh boutique-style urban apartment building. My husband had recently received a sizable raise after many years with his current company, and we wanted to be closer to his office and to mine. We chose this particular building as it was brand new and offered an array of shopping, eating, and outdoor amenities, without ever having to leave the building or surrounding shopping center. We quickly settled in and started enjoying the new change of pace. At first everything was fine, but about 3 months into our lease, we noticed that the front office completely changed staff. We were upset about the change because 2 of the receptionists had been personal friends of ours. We asked them why everybody had been let go, but they said they didn't know why. Apparently corporate had just decided they wanted a change. We were sad to see our friends go, especially our 2 and 3-year-old boys, who had grown quite fond of their daily visit to the office of milk and cookies. We also noticed that the new staff was mainly comprised of much younger, attractive women. We assumed then that the management company intended to appeal to the college crowd and singles. We were slightly annoyed with the general lack of experience in customer service, but thought that it wasn't the end of the world, and we moved on. Then weird stuff happened. One morning I walked into the living room to find our patio door wide open. It seemed odd because we triple locked it to keep the children from accessing the patio unsupervised. I locked the door and then accused my husband of being absent-minded and leaving it open. He swore that he hadn't touched the door or the locks in days, and I let it go, but made a mental note to start checking it every night before bed, just in case. About 2 weeks later, I awoke to the sound of my oldest boy screaming for me somewhere outside of the apartment. When I found him, he was wandering the hallway outside, soaked in urine and utterly terrified. At the time, we were absolutely baffled at how he managed to unlock 2 locks and a childproof lock cover. When we asked him what happened, he said that a monster was in his room, looking at him, and he didn't want to move, so he peed in the bed. Honestly, I was so happy he was safe that I just chalked it up to a kid imagination and my husband not locking the door properly again. It never crossed my mind that someone had potentially been inside the apartment and let him out. They would have had to open the door from the outside, and only we have a key. Weird stuff like that kept happening for several more months, and we kept finding reasonable excuses that explained everything away. But then one afternoon I got a call from the office of our apartment. We had recently installed a Ring doorbell to alert us when someone was at the door. It was mostly an attempt to prevent another runaway toddler. The woman from the office asked me if our door camera was operational or just put there to make people think that we had security. I informed her that it was 100% functional and that we installed video surveillance in our nursery and the adjoining bathroom to keep the kids safe. She then asked me a really weird question. She wanted to know if I would add her to our security devices so that she could view our Ring footage. Of course, I politely told her that that was not going to happen. I asked her why she wanted it, but never got a clear answer. I told my husband about the call later that night, and he agreed that we should make an effort to always keep the Ring charged and recording to the cloud. We did, and things seemed fine for a while. Over the course of our lease, the doors have continued to occasionally, magically, come unlocked and open. Even locks that the kids can't reach. And it's always overnight, or we notice them when we get home from work. About 2 months ago, things started to go missing from the apartment. At first it was little things like a new tube of mascara or a $20 bill left on the kitchen island. My husband and I thought it might be our baby storing them somewhere like treasures. He sometimes does that with my husband's golf balls, so it wasn't too far-fetched. But then bigger, more expensive items started to disappear. Our iPad vanished from my nightstand. A leather jacket with a designer label no longer hung from its hanger on the side of my closet. A bra, still with tags, went absent from one of my dresser drawers, and a full bottle of prescription painkillers was nowhere to be found. So was half of a bottle of my anxiety meds. We now began to suspect that something really weird was happening in our apartment, but had no proof. The nursery and bathroom cameras didn't show anything during the day, and we started making our boys sleep in bed with us at night. The bedroom door locked from the inside. I could swear that I woke up in the middle of the night, once to a slight thudding noise, and saw the shadows of movement on the other side of the door, but I fell back asleep before I could register what was happening. I take a Tylenol 3 most nights before bed, so while I do wake up at the slightest noise, staying awake is a battle of its own. This is our last month at these apartments. In 2 weeks we'll be moving into our home. 2 weeks ago I obtained a money order for the last month's rent. It was a large money order, and had to be halved in 2. As always, I brought it home, along with the receipt, and placed them in a magnetic sleeve attached to the freezer that also housed our monthly invoice. Now, I don't know how to fill out a money order. I know how stupid that is, but I never worried about it since my husband usually fills them out and pays our rent. It's not that I can't learn, but I'm lazy and don't mind letting him do that. That means that the money order in the rent sleeve was blank. And guess what? It too went missing. A novice mistake, I know, but thank God for online banking. One call to our bank and an investigation had begun. We waited with unease until this afternoon, when a representative from the company that had an issue with the money order gave us a call. The call was to inform us that the order had been cashed, and that a thief was identified. Sure enough, it was one of the receptionists in our building, the same young woman who had called to ask about our new security devices. She had been using the spare maintenance key to come inside of our apartment whenever she wanted to. Tomorrow I will take this information to the building's manager. At the moment, we weren't pressing charges as long as our conditions are met. Hopefully this young lady gets help because we don't think she's malicious, just a thief and a grade A creeper. Don't worry, tonight will be our last night here. As far as her watching my children sleep goes, I can't say that I'll be comfortable having them sleep away from me for a good long while. I feel terrible for not believing my son. I tear up just thinking about how scared he must have been. The new house will get a full security system with every bell and whistle. We're still not sure how she got past the Ring camera without being seen, but my husband is dead set on figuring it out. An update to this story. When we got to the office this morning, the manager greeted us, apologized about 20 times, and informed us that said receptionist had been let go when she arrived on the property this morning. We made sure that he understood the gravity of the situation, especially concerning our children's safety, and the fact that the building is mostly comprised of families and retirees. We came to an agreement not to pursue legal action against the company as long as we could leave today with our deposit in hand and never hear from them again. We also made him promise to send out a PSA to the other residents explaining portions of the situation in case she had been doing this to other people, which I would put money on that she did. We are currently throwing our belongings into boxes and laundry baskets, awaiting family and friends coming to help us move out. My husband and I decided not to pursue our missing property. However, we will be filing charges for the theft of the money order. We think she was leaving the patio doors unlocked because we have a first-floor apartment with a sunroom, and she was unlocking them at night when we charged the ring, so that she could let herself in during the day via the patio. It explains why we never got her on camera, and why she would be so bold as to come in at night while we were home asleep. My guess is that the night that our son got out, she had snuck in to unlock the back door and saw him awake. She must have waited until he was still for a while, and then ran back out the front door, forgetting to completely shut and lock it. When he finally felt safe enough to get out of the bed, he saw the lights from the hall and followed them, wanting to be out of the dark, where he saw the monster. This story was from around 5 years ago, give or take a few months. To set the stage, I was 19 and living in a very large city in the southern US, population nearly 2 million, and with several military installations. I was dating a guy at the time who was in the army and stationed at the joint base nearest to where I was living at the time. I had a full-time job and also was in school, but all of my free time was spent with my boyfriend, and since he was in training at the time, he didn't have a car, so I was on and off that base constantly, and I had gotten to know the gate guards. I still had to present my visitor ID and pass every time because it was protocol, but they knew me. The base itself is huge, like its own little small town, in and of itself. Driving onto the base by accident is impossible. There are a few entrances, but I usually used the second biggest entrance. To get there, you had to drive down a 5-lane road, 2 lanes each way, and 1 turning lane. As you approach, there's a huge golf course that's part of the base, as well as our national cemetery. So there's huge fences and large signs stating that it's government property. And to the right is some businesses, restaurants, barbershops, dry cleaners, and gas stations, as well as a few residential neighborhoods with smaller side streets. But as you get closer to the gate, there's really nowhere to go except the base, unless you're going to the physical rehab center, senior living center, that's on the right, and literally the last place to turn in before you're going through the gates. The road leading into the base is really long, so as you go further away from the base on the same road, there's more businesses, more neighborhoods, apartments, and a Walmart, both approximately 3 to 5 miles, give or take, from the gate. I also happened to use this road when I was going straight from work to pick up my boyfriend, as there's an exit from the interstate and the most direct route, so I was just heading down the road. And one thing I'll note is that I'm a pretty careful driver, ever since I got into a terrible car accident with my mom when I was 12 and seriously injured. I drive a little faster than the speed limit, but not by much, and I always try to move out of the way for people going faster than me, because I know it can be annoying to be stuck driving behind somebody going slower than you, and just because I want to go slower doesn't mean I want to annoy other drivers by it. I was about 2 miles from base, in the right-hand lane, when I came up on somebody slowing down to take a turn. I checked my mirrors and flicked on my blinker, and went to make a lane change to go around. There had been an old clunky blue van, like a Chevy Astro or something similar looking, in the left lane, but it was still pretty far back, and I was planning to move back to my lane anyways as soon as I passed the car in front of me. Well, Mr. Astro didn't like me getting into his lane when I was going slower than he was. Again, he was far enough back that if he maintained his speed, I would have been back over before he reached me. But no, I heard an engine rev, and all of a sudden this guy was right on my bumper, laying on his horn, making rude gestures. I've always been a rather meek and quiet person, and I hate confrontation, so I was going to pull back into the right lane to get back over once I passed the car in front of me. But by then it was another car in that lane trying to speed past everyone, so I couldn't move over immediately. As I waited for another car to pass so I can move into the right lane, the Astro behind me is speeding up on my tail and then backing off just to speed up on my tail again. Other car passes and I move into the right lane so the Astro can pass me. He sped up and then slowed, so he was driving right next to my car. I glanced over and this older guy with raggedy hair and a dirty ratty beard just stared over at me, still making rude gestures. Then made a gun sign with his hand and pointed his fingers at me, miming shooting me in the head. This really freaked me out, but not as much as when he slowed down even further and got right behind me again. This road could be really trafficy during rush hours, but I'd gotten off of work early that day, around 3:45, so the traffic wasn't bad, and he definitely did not need to be behind me anymore. So there was so much room for him just to go around and leave behind me. Obviously freaked out, I tried to shake him. I changed lanes. He followed me and I slowed down, and so did he. So I got back into the right lane, coming up on a light that just turned yellow, and made a risky, very quick right turn on that road, hoping he wouldn't be able to follow me. He apparently didn't care and took the turn right after me. I remember looking into my rear view and seeing the van practically leaning on the turn, and he was still yelling, making hand gestures at me. I took some more turns and started weaving through a neighborhood trying to lose him, but he just kept following me. Finally, a moment of clarity hit me when I took a sharp turn, and my visitor's pass for base slid off of the front seat. I wove through the neighborhood until I got back to the road that we had been on, the one that leads straight into the base, and I booked it down the road with Mr. Astro right behind me. I saw him in my rear view as I pulled up to the gate, and was terrified to see him pull in behind me. I thought there was no way that this guy could follow me onto the base. At the time, they were an FPCON Bravo, which means no one could drive onto the base unless they had proper military staff or ID for a 30-day visitor pass and driver's license. But luckily, I knew the guard at the gate. I pulled in and he could tell I was a bit frazzled because my hands were shaking as I handed him my ID and my pass. Before he could ask, I said, "The guy in the car behind me is very scary. He's been following me for 15 minutes, making hand gestures and yelling. He made finger guns like he was going to shoot me." And the guard was very nice and smiled and nodded and acted like everything was okay. Didn't even glance back at the van. He told me, "Okay, don't worry about it. You're safe now, and this guy won't get anywhere near you. Is your boyfriend done for the day?" I said, "No, I don't think he's done till 4:30. I was just going to read in my car until he's done." He told me to go about with my plans, to head over to my boyfriend's barracks, and he and the other guards would handle it. I did exactly what he told me to do. My boyfriend's barracks weren't too far from the gate entrance, luckily, and after 2 turns I would be completely out of sight of the gate. I waited for my boyfriend, and when he came out I told him everything that happened. I was shaking and crying. He ended up driving us back to my place, and we exited from the main gate that was on the other side of the base. It was a longer drive home, but meant that we wouldn't run the risk of a guy possibly waiting on the side of a road to drive back out of base. When I took him back that night, guards had obviously done a shift change, but my boyfriend knew the one working and asked if she'd heard anything about the guy following somebody. She was very excited to tell us about the guy in the blue van who ended up being arrested by military police. As it turned out, the dude tried to tell the guard I was his daughter and was just being difficult, and could he please let him through to go and get me. The guard played it cool and pretended to be understanding, but said he needed to do a sweep of the car, and that they would have to have somebody escort him to find me since he didn't have military ID or visitor pass. The guy tried to say no, but the guard insisted. The guy tried to get in through the gate on foot. Clearly not a good idea to try to force your way onto a military installation. He didn't even make it a quarter mile before MPs had pulled over and cuffed him, and they found a gun in his center console. I don't know what that guy would have done if he caught up with me. Maybe assaulted or killed any number of things. Who knows? I no longer live in that city. I'm no longer dating that boyfriend. I have new license plates on my car from my new state, and I have no idea what eventually happened to Mr. Astro. I'm sure he probably did some jail time, considering that he tried to gun it through a base with a firearm in the console, but I have no idea how much time, and I have no desire to try and find out what happened to him. It was in college. My roommate was a born-again Christian, and she invited me to her Bible study in church all the time. Eventually I went, and I kept going. Wasn't a fan of the pastor, but there were a lot of nice young adults who liked to have clean, sober fun, and I didn't drink or party, so I felt like I fit in. But I didn't agree with everything they believed in. Just the more normal stuff like God and helping the poor, not some other things. This one guy in the Bible study, Drew, was pretty quiet. Good looking. Seemed like he knew everything about the Bible, which amazed me. I thought, I know nothing about this. He's very wise. I was 21 and he was 27. He wasn't a college student. He just worked, which I later learned maybe he didn't. We were going to go on a young adult retreat, and because I worked, I couldn't leave early on Friday to drive up to the mountains with the girls in the group. Mutual friends said that I could ride with Drew, so I said okay. On the way up, Drew was pretty quiet for the first hour. Not very friendly at all, and it was a long trip. But as we got closer to the mountains, he really warmed up. We got pizza, and he paid, which was nice. Then he stopped the car just so we could look at the stars. He even played some Brian McKnight. He was turning it into a date, but I didn't know it or see it that way then. I was starting to really like him and felt like we had a connection. He's just about to drop me off at the girls' cabin when he suddenly gets very serious and tells me that something happened between him and another girl in our church group, but she is telling lies about him and to not believe whatever I hear. He doesn't explain what actually happened and doesn't say who it is. I enter the cabin and all the girls are there, and very quickly one girl, Bree, who is probably the youngest in the group, who is 19, tells all of us, "Ladies, there is a wolf in sheep clothing among us at this retreat." Now, if you don't know church folk, they get very dramatic and talk like this all the time, so I just thought, okay, here is some drama. She tells us the story about how she was talking to some guy here, but he started stalking her and wouldn't take no for an answer, and even threatened her sister. Now my spidey sense is up and I realize this must be what Drew was telling me about. The church group doesn't know who it is because she won't say, because she doesn't want to gossip, and she says leadership will handle it. Well, Drew eventually leaves the weekend retreat early. There goes my ride back, I thought. I don't know if he was ever asked to leave or what. That week Drew asks me to hang out, and we do. I still like him and don't know who to believe. On our hangout we didn't really do anything. He takes me to the mall and reads the Bible to me. Okay, cool. Then he parks his car on some suburban lookout, top of the world type of thing, and just says that he is a view guy who really likes views. I'm not one to be impressed by suburban lights, so I'm just like, okay, well, this is boring. I give him another chance. I invite him to come see a play with me. When he does, he immediately meets one of my friends, Brian. Brian introduces us to his boyfriend, Nick. I'm in the theater. Many gay friends. Well, for the majority of the rest of the date, Drew lectures me about how gays are going to hell, and I must not really love them if I don't stop to tell them that. I eventually cry because it is this ugly argument in his car that we were having for hours in the parking lot of Panera. I say, I want to go home. This is basically the worst date ever. I don't agree with what he says. He also tells me I need to give up my dream of being an actress because what if the Lord doesn't want me to do that? Theater is something I did my whole life, not to mention my major, and his reasons for giving it up had nothing to do with the impracticality of it, but because of God. This guy was nuts. I get home and I offer to make us some cocoa to just kind of end things as friends, or at least on a better note. I know I will see him at church, and we have mutual friends and are in the same Bible study. Things got weird. He tried to get sexual with me, but then also blamed me for tempting him. I ended up crying again. I just wanted him to go home, but I was so emotionally exhausted I didn't know what to make of this. He calls and texts me that week and I don't respond. Then it's a Sunday night. I am talking to my friend Tim, who no longer goes to this church anymore. I tell him I went on a date with Drew. Before I can tell him how it went, Tim says, "What? That guy's crazy. You need to abort that mission." Tim tells me that he is close with Bree and her family, and Drew is a stalker and threatened Bree's sister. I don't know what to believe, because it sounds like Tim believes this just based on Bree's story. I hang up and I call my mom trying to tell her what happened, what Tim told me about Drew and how it was such weird timing considering what happened with me. While I'm on the phone with my mom, I get a knock at the door. It's 10 p.m. on Sunday night. I look out, but nobody's there. I go to get my roommate and ask her if she can just sit with me in the front room because I'm freaked out and think somebody's there. There's another knock at the door. I open it and it's Drew, and he looks all in a frenzy. I asked him what he was doing here, and he said he just needed to talk to me, and I wasn't answering my phone, which was because I was genuinely busy earlier in the day. The conversation is getting long, and my roommate is still sitting there, so I tell her she can go back to her room. It's okay. I let him come in because I'm conditioned to be overly nice, and this was a big mistake. We started talking, and as soon as my roommate is gone, he pulls out a knife and starts saying how he was worried my neighbors did something to me because I wasn't answering his text, and he didn't know what kind of situation he'd be walking into. I have zero fighting skills, no experience in that situation at all, so I calmly say as casually as possible, "Hey, can you put the knife away? It makes me feel uncomfortable." He asks me if I want the knife, and I say no, I just want to pretend it's not here. I somehow talk him down, get him to leave. I think I convince him that he still has a shot with me somehow. The next morning my mind is clearer, and I feel like I need to tell my mom what happened. She has me tell my dad, who has me tell the church youth leader and security at my apartment. I tell the cop the whole story, and he says that this guy is definitely a stalker, and I will see him again unless the police call him. I say it's fine, I think everything's going to be okay, there's no need to call. I just didn't want any more drama. I had never talked to a policeman about anything before. I was still processing and didn't understand that this was serious. My mistake. The next night I went to a party, another church-related one, but Drew is not supposed to be here. He told me before that he wasn't going. Well, he is there. I decided to leave, but my 21-year-old self doesn't think to ask to have someone walk me out. I figure, if I leave, and he is still there, problem solved. I didn't anticipate him realizing I left and following me. I'm walking to my car in a dark apartment parking lot, and I hear him call out my name. He's following me. I start running and say I don't want to talk. He begins chasing me. I am clicking my car to open, thinking this is how girls die, because she did not let the cop call the stalker, because she is dumb. Thankfully my car unlocks and I get in and drive away. Problem is this guy knows where I live. I move out 2 weeks later, and I block him on all social media and my phone. Drew eventually somehow managed to make another Facebook profile and sent me a message that Summer says he was praying for me and had forgiven me for trashing him to people, even though I still never told anyone what happened, except for the useless pastor who did nothing. That was the last I saw and heard of him. Unfortunately, this predator continued to serve at the church in the junior high ministries of all places, around many young girls. No one on church leadership listened to me or to Bree, who both complained that this guy was stalking us. I never reached out to Bree to let her know what happened to me, and I never got to hear her story in detail. But I had told the young adult pastor about the knife, and him trying to get sexual with me and how I was scared. Thankfully, I didn't go to that church anymore, and this was all before the Me Too movement. What sucks is I've had a few experiences with crazy religious guys. This was the first, but not the last. And I'm still trying to come to terms with why that is. I guess I should give some background before I get into this story. I became homeless in late January, so I am living in my car with my 120-pound female mastiff, who is a guarding breed. She keeps me very, very safe, and always has. We have a routine in the mornings. First, I walk her at my cousin's house. Then I go to a local rest stop to use the facilities and brush my teeth and wash my face and whatnot. After that, I go to a park and ride by the rest stop to walk my dog again. Because of the virus, lots of people frequent this park and ride to either sit and read, listen to podcasts or audiobooks, or to nap. Now, when I walk my dog, I leave the back door of my car open because she is old and has arthritis, and it's hard for her to get in and out of the car. I usually have to lift her up from her underbelly to load her into the car. I also leave it open that way because she is fear aggressive with humans due to being abused as a puppy, and she is a dog aggressive, so I like to make sure I can get her in the car quickly if I need to. I also like to park my car between a large van and an SUV that are seemingly abandoned there, or just left there for whatever reason, so that my car is kind of hidden and nobody will park next to me. Last week the van wasn't at the park and ride, so I parked to the left of the SUV, as usual, with a huge space between my car and any others in that row. I was walking my dog in the grass pretty far away from my car, and as usual I had the car running with the back door slightly open. I was far enough from it that you wouldn't know it was mine if you passed it. While walking my dog, I noticed a flash of a silver car out of the corner of my eye. I thought it might be a state trooper, and if it was, because I have both paranoia and an anxiety disorder, that he might reprimand me for walking my dog there. I stayed calm and continued to walk my dog, intent on getting her to do her business so we could get back in the car and leave. The car passed by once more, and I noticed it wasn't a state police car. It was a silver Honda with an old man driving. He was purposely driving as close as he could to my dog and I, without hitting the curb, and was literally just crawling the car along our path. When I turned around, he did too. He crept past once more, staring out of his open window at me the entire time, and not even watching the road. I got agitated at that, and resigned myself to the idea that I would have to confront him if he continued to stalk us. He passed by once more, crawling again and trying to get closer. When he realized I was headed for the cars, he turned around again. I got my dog, named Karma, in the car and settled myself into the driver's seat, and took some time to give her a bowl of fresh, clean water and her treats, and took a moment to plug in my laptop to my inverter and charge it for later. I saw the silver car out of the corner of my eye again, and watched as the old man parked a few cars away from mine, in the same row next to a man in a black pickup truck that I noticed was watching this old man curiously. I was thankful the man in the truck was there and watching, and had noticed the way the old man was creeping by me and stalking me. The old man purposely reverse parked so his window was lined up with my driver's side window, and continued to belligerently stare at me from out of his open window, as I did what I needed to before I'd leave the park and ride. He was leaning against his door, with his head out and just staring straight at me, not even blinking. I ignored him as I had been doing, carrying on with my business, when I plugged in my phone and organized the belongings in my front seat, and gathered up some garbage to put in the little garbage bag I kept on the floor of the front seat. I was raised to be tough and unafraid, and I wasn't going to let this creepy old guy spook me. I looked up after about 10 minutes, and he was still staring right at me, still not even blinking, so I turned my head and avoided eye contact as I put on my seatbelt. I had been running the car the whole time I walked my dog, so I was good to go. I went to pull out of my spot, and my backup camera went off, and I saw that silver car right behind me, blocking me from pulling out of my parking spot. At this point, I was angry and ready to give this old man a what for, but I reminded myself that he just might be a little bit off. My grandpa had dementia, and before he was diagnosed, he did strange things and would often forget where he was, and he would hallucinate. I figured maybe this old man was having troubles of his own. The old man pulled up next to me, and as I put my car back in gear to leave, my dog began going wild, and I heard a voice. Mind you, I had locked all my doors and closed all my windows while this man was staring at me to make it clear that I was not to be approached and was not interested in conversation. My dog was climbing into my front seat and blocking off my view so I couldn't pull out. She was barking like crazy and snarling at this man, with her hair standing up on her back. At this point, I just stopped and put the car in park, shoved her into the back seat, and rolled down my window to see what this creep wanted. I noticed he had an oxygen tube in his nose, but there was no oxygen tank to be seen anywhere in his car. I have a good eye for these things because my grandma had one for 2 years before she died, and I also worked in a pharmacy where I delivered pharmacy supplies door to door at an elderly living community with a health center and assisted living center. I can spot an oxygen tank of any size and in any kind of container or case anywhere. There was none in his car. He says to me, "Are you all right?" So I say, "Yes, I'm fine." I go to roll my window back up when he speaks again. "Are you broken down? Do you need help?" I give him an incredulous look and firmly say, "No, I'm not. My car is fine and so am I." Again, I try to roll up the windows as he shouts, "Well, it looked like your car was broken down, which is why I pulled up here next to you. I think something's wrong with your car." Again, I tell him my car is fine. I'm fine. I don't need any help, and rudely thank him for his concern, but he doesn't let it go. He tells me once more that he thinks my car is broken down and that he can help me. At this point, I'm no longer trying to be polite. I give him a nasty look. Don't even bother to stop my dog from barking at him. And I say, "I'm fine. Thanks." He just nods and slowly, ever so slowly, crawls out of his parking space and down the lot towards the exit and hangs there as if he's waiting for me to drive out. My instincts are telling me that something is really off with this guy, but I'm trying to rationalize, chalking it up to my paranoia and anxiety and general distrust of people. I tell myself he's probably just a bit senile and means well. Still, I stay stubbornly in my spot and do not leave until he gives up and pulls out of the lot, going the opposite way that I was going to. The whole day the entire incident bothered me. It wasn't until later, when talking to my male friend, that I realized how messed up the whole thing was. He didn't know which car was mine when he began stalking me. I was nowhere near it. Once I got in my car, he pulled up a few spots away to purposely continue watching me, and seeing that my car was clearly fine and running since I was blasting the AC and rolled up my windows without any difficulty. I've had cars that have broken down before, and I'm mechanically inclined enough, as my friend pointed out. If my car was broken down, I would have at least had the hood popped, and I'd be elbows deep in my engine, checking my oil, my other fluids, my belts, radiator, battery, my alternator. Been there, done that a million times. Once again, he had the oxygen tube in his nose, and no tank anywhere in sight. I drive an SUV and he was in a Honda sedan, so I was easily able to see into his vehicle, and nothing. The fact that he insisted something was wrong with my car bothered me. It was as if he wanted me to get out of the car to either check, probably thinking because I'm a young, small female that I don't understand mechanics, or know when something is wrong with my car, or to prove to him that it was fine. There were no signs at all that anything was wrong with my car, and if there was, I wouldn't be out walking my dog. I'd be elbows deep in the engine bay, on the phone with the towing company, and I would be highly stressed out and filthy. What's even more bothersome is he did this in broad daylight, with people watching from their cars. He purposely stalked me as close as he could with his car, nearly driving in the grass, turning around and creeping slowly past me 3 times, and following me as I walked, and then parked near my car once he saw me get in. I think he parked next to me and stared at me like that, to try to take some time to figure out an excuse, or a reason to approach me before he stopped me from leaving, and pulled up next to me. The entire thing was incredibly uncomfortable, creepy, off, and gave me Ted Bundy vibes. After all, an elderly man with an oxygen tube in his nose doesn't look like he's capable of harming anybody. But oh boy, did he want me to get out of my car. Him hanging around the exit to try and catch me leaving was probably the worst of it all. It wasn't enough that he stalked and harassed me in the lot. No. Why not try to follow me where I was going? So old man in the park, with the oxygen tube that connected to nothing, let's not meet again. As a child, kindergarten age, I loved to talk. If anyone had a question for me, I would gleefully give them way too much information. Most people found it endearing and would praise me for being so smart, which encouraged me a lot. My mom and I normally shopped at the market just a few minutes away from our house. My mom had been shopping there for 20-some years at that point, and was friends with most of the workers, so I was friendly with them too, and was always happy to talk with them. Whenever my mom got distracted talking to someone, I, with the attention span of a 6-year-old, would wander around the aisle. My mom would keep an eye on me to make sure I didn't get too far, but if she was distracted, one of the other employees would usually be around and gently guide me back over. One day, though, we went to a different market that I couldn't remember having been to before, and we didn't go back to for nearly a decade. We were walking around the aisles when my mom ran into her friend. They started talking, and I, not realizing that I no longer had a store full of adults keeping an eye on me, started wandering around the aisle. My eyes caught some colorful display, I think flowers or balloons, and went over to look. Once I was satisfied with my inspection, I turned back to the aisle only to find that my mom wasn't there. That had never happened before. I looked around a little, though not moving from my spot near the colorful displays. Since it was right next to the registers, there was a decent amount of people nearby, which I'm thankful for now. As I was looking around, an employee came up to me. He was older than my sister. She was 12 or 13 at the time, and younger than my dad, in his mid-40s, which was the only way I could gauge age. Now I would probably say he was in his early to mid-20s if I remember right. "Hi there," he said sweetly, in that tone you normally speak to kids in. I cheerfully said hello, actually stepping a little bit closer. "Are you looking for your mommy?" I say yes, happily explaining that I had last seen her talking to her friend, and that I could normally find her easily when I wandered away, so I wasn't sure where she could have gone. "Does she leave you alone often?" "Not really. My older sister was normally with me, if my mom wasn't. She was 12 or 13, and she was super mature, so if my mom had to leave for a little bit, she knew I would be okay, and she never left us alone in public, just at home if she needed to run somewhere. Never for very long, just the length of a time of a Pokemon episode or something. And my dad was at work a lot, and didn't come back until late, usually, if you're wondering." "Where do you live?" "Well, wouldn't you know, I just learned my address. We just learned how to mail a letter in school. Even took a little class trip to the mailbox on our school corner to send them out. I knew how to write my address now, and I knew how to say it. You want to hear?" "Of course you do. I know kids are naive, but I was downright dumb. I was diagnosed with colorblindness 2 years later, otherwise known as red-green colorblindness. It makes sense, I was totally blind to all the red flags." "Where do you go to school? Who picks you up?" "Well, I go to the local elementary school. I don't know the address though, sorry, but I know what street it's on, because I wait on the sidewalk for my mom, or daycare sitter depending on the day, so I see the street sign a lot since I'm usually waiting for a while to be grabbed." "Do you like animals? You like puppies?" "Dogs scare me. Cats scare me. Pigeons scare me. Fish scare me. Flies scare me. You know what doesn't scare me? Turtles. I have 5 turtles. No dog that might bark or bite if someone drops by the house, like our neighbor does. Those dogs are always behind the gate though, so they don't scare me a lot." It had only been a few minutes since I last saw my mom. Even with how much information I was dumping, I was a very fast talker. But I was starting to get a little antsy. Not because I was uncomfortable talking to a stranger, but because I had skipped lunch that day specifically to con my mom into letting me get a bagel from the store next door, which is why we were at that market in the first place. My mom was holding onto the bagel to make sure I didn't eat it too fast and choke, which I had done several times in the past. I wanted my bagel, and while I talked to this grown man who made me feel so smart and was oh so interested in my life, I liked bagels more. Plus, if I caught my mom when we were at the bakery section, I might be able to use my charm and cuteness to get a cookie. So I gotta find my mom now. "Oh well, I'll walk around with you to help find her. You want to lead me through a marketplace you work at, where you can easily bring me to the back room, meat locker, or any number of places?" "Yeah, sounds good." "Ozzy!" I look around to see my mom. The relieved look on her face slowly changed into something more anxious. I smile happily and wave her over. She immediately grabs my hand, and I can tell she wants to chide me, probably for leaving the aisle. But she seems more occupied on the man in front of me. Before I can open my mouth to introduce him, or remember that I even got his name, he quickly says that he's glad I found my mom, and he needs to get back to work, and practically runs to the back of the store. My mom puts her hands on my shoulders and looks me in the eye, her expression a lot more worried now. "What was he talking to you about?" she asks, her voice more serious than I'd ever heard her. "Can I have my bagel?" My mom opens her mouth, pauses, and goes into her purse to hand me my bagel. Between bites, I happily tell her about the conversation and everything I remembered. My age, my grade, pickup schedule, likes and dislikes, my literal address. My mom gradually became paler, then became red with anger. She brought me over to the manager, and I don't remember much about the conversation. I got a cookie. I remember that pretty well. It was shaped like a watermelon, which was apparently far more important to me than paying attention to what was being said. The police were not called. We went home and my mom told me I wasn't allowed to walk around the store anymore. No more talking to any strangers, even if they worked at the store that we were at, unless she was with me. If I ever saw that man again, I was to run away, find someone I know, and ask for help. If all else fails, scream at the top of my lungs, just like when a fly lands on me. I agree pleasantly, not really fazed by anything she's saying. I know that some people are bad, but bad people look bad, right? They talk mean, they look scary, and they try to grab you. But this guy didn't. So he wasn't bad, was he? But if my mom was saying it, then I would listen. I better enjoy that cookie, because we weren't going back to that store ever again. In exchange, I can get a donut once a month from our usual store. When I was around 12, our school had a safety assembly and was talking about the shady things adults do to get kids, in a very, very watered-down version of what they most likely wanted. And I'm sitting there, listening, and I suddenly realize, if my mom hadn't found me, something bad might have happened. If not in the store, then in front of my school. If not in front of my school, then my house. It's been a little over a decade later. Now I'm 18, and I've never seen the guy again, and let's keep it that way.